What's going on, YouTube and everybody out there in Cowboys Nation? My name is Zach, and welcome to my brand new channel, Pulse of the Star, where here I'm going to be breaking down and evaluating everything that y'all might be interested in regarding your favorite Dallas Cowboys. This is such a thrill for me to go ahead and start this journey for myself, as well as for many of you guys out there that may be watching or have already followed me on Twitter. Football is such a passion for me ever since playing it as a little kid and growing up in it, then translating that love for it into watching what I believe to be the greatest football team on earth every Sunday with my friends and family. So to be able to create new relationships and dialogue about this organization, it's really exciting for me. So really pumped to get this started. With this first video, I want to go ahead and break down the 53-man roster that was released this week, as well as keying in on some guys and what their roles are going to be throughout the season this year, how immediately of an impact some of these young guys can have. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my list of key players as far as who made the squad this year. A lot of depth and a lot of young guys here that are going to have some immediate impact. I want to move straight into the running back room where we already know what we're going to have out of Tony Pollard. We're going to have a much higher volume of touches for him, and his explosiveness and his ability to break off of tacklers and make people miss is already going to expand what they have in this offense. But right now I want to key in on Deuce Vaughn. He's been talk of the show for the past few weeks. I think mostly because of his size. It's so fun to watch somebody so small be so shifty and break off of tackles as well as he does. So I'm really excited to see the role that he is going to have in this offense. I do believe that Brian Schottenheimer and Mike McCarthy are going to develop some packages for him as far as the passing game goes. And in the red zone, I think his abilities within like the screen game or in tight spaces, moving into the red zone is going to be fantastic. He almost has a size advantage with as small as he is because I've said this before that he reminds me of a small version of Le'Veon Bell with his patience and vision, his ability to hide behind his blockers, and then whenever he sees an immediate gap or hole turn up, he explodes and pops through the hole and then can immediately make the next guy miss. So I'm really excited for how much he can expand this offense coming behind Tony Pollard and that duo right there, how much of an impact they're going to have together, actually. Let's go ahead and move to the next position, being the tight end room. There is actually quite a bit more to talk about here as the Dallas Cowboys spent a high value draft pick on a guy who hasn't really showcased his catching abilities, at least throughout college. Out at Michigan, they developed such good run blocking tight ends as well as offensive linemen just because they rely so heavily on the run game, which is going to pay dividends for this offense. But I do think that him being a showcase guy is going to develop as the season goes on. But right now, your guy is going to be Jake Ferguson. With Schultz's departure, it was kind of hard to judge who was going to step up or which guys they were going to have to roll with just to replace what was a very solid player for the past few years with Dak Prescott. But Jake Ferguson, who has actually been widely talked about around the league by some players, including Travis Kelce, by all people, his ability to not only high point and body control when going down the seams, but his tenacity in the blocking game is going to be such an elite combo for himself, as well as Dak Prescott, who has loved his tight ends throughout his career. He relies so heavily on them, and this is going to be a guy who is going to have not as much attention on him as you have CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, and a lot of that speed flying across the field, that the middle of the field is going to open up substantially for Jake Ferguson, especially with how wide of a range this offensive scheme is going to have, implementing new mesh concepts that are going to be very productive from tight ends and the backfield. So really excited for Jake Ferguson, what he's going to bring to this team. I actually think he elevates it a little bit more than Schultz does, just because Schultz was a security blanket rather than a go-get-'em kind of guy. So Jake Ferguson, it is his time, and I think as other guys like Schoonmaker and Hendo are gonna develop, this is going to be such a solid tight end route moving forward. Let's go ahead and get to the bottom half of my offensive guys. These are guys that I think were a shocker to some people, but for me, it was actually almost a necessity to keep these guys. That being Asim Richards, T.J. Bass, and then moving back to the running back room with Hunter Luepke. Two of these guys being undrafted free agents, one a flyer in the middle of the draft. These are complete project and developmental guys. As far as the offensive line goes, you really love to see the amount of confidence they have in these two guys with Richards and Bass as coming into training camp and some of the preseason games. There's a whole lot of concern across Cowboys Nation, as well as I'm sure within the staff room, that the offensive line depth was way too thin. The pass protection looked abysmal through the first two games. But the key takeaways are that you were able to swim past some of the guys that you knew were no longer going to have roles on this team and identify the guys that you're going to be able to develop moving forward. Asim Richards, I think he has fantastic hands as well as vision. You saw this in a couple of the preseason games, his ability to pull out and be a lead blocker, as well as recognize what's coming at him in pass protection, is something to really work on and develop him as an offensive tackle. That doesn't take away from his flexibility to move inside at guard. But I do think right now, when you have a young piece playing in a swing position behind your starting five, you need to give him a specific position to go ahead and develop in and lean on later. As far as TJ Bass goes, being undrafted, this was a little bit more of a shocker to me. But at Oregon, he was one of the better, if not the best, run blocking guard in the nation. And then he comes into the NFL and translates it by being one of the better pass protectors, not only on this team but across the entire NFL through the preseason. So it's a bit of back and forth there. I think his ability to the second level is going to need a whole lot of work. He does tend to lean a lot in his blocks. He tends to get off balance when moving his feet to the second level. So these are obviously young guys that are going to need a lot of attention, but the future of this team and this offense is going to rely very heavily on the continuity and experience of the trenches. And I think it is set up very, very well by this front office right now. Like I said, going back to the running back room with Hunter Luepke, to me, this is actually my most exciting guy, as the Dallas Cowboys, at least in the Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy era, have not had a true fullback, or at least a real blocking presence in the backfield, unless you want to give that role to what Ezekiel Elliott was the last few years, or some of the tight end packages they had when Sean McKeon was in the backfield, or the Hulk package that Kellen Moore wanted to implement with guards in the backfield for absolutely no reason. But moving into this year, what Mike McCarthy has done in the past, his resume in Green Bay on his ability to utilize very different positions across the field gives me a lot of promise for Hunter Luepke. His ability to give you a very solid blocking presence in the backfield, and then to shift him out or to motion him out and use him in the flats, or as a lead blocker for two backs that you really want to have high roles in this offense. There's a whole lot that he can do there, and I do believe with the amount of weapons on this offense, Luepke's going to be able to have a chance to make an immediate impact by not having so much attention on him. Mike McCarthy knows how to use a fullback. He knows how to run this offense, especially in a West Coast scheme. So I do believe Hunter Luepke is going to be a very highly utilized position for this team moving forward. Let me go ahead and move on to the defensive side. As you can see on my list, I have, again, a lot of young guys and a couple of guys that were maybe shockers to make the cut for this team. We'll go ahead and start with the obvious, with Mozzie Smith, the first-round draft pick this year for the Dallas Cowboys. There's been so much discussion and discord about him all across the media that he's already a bust. We're not even into week one of the NFL season, and people are tearing apart the front office for making this pick, or for maybe taking a flyer on a guy that they didn't know exactly what he was going to be. But to me, at least for me, I know exactly what he's going to be, at least at the beginning of this season, and that is strictly a space eater in the run game. Mozzie Smith really right now has no other expectation than to do so as his other roles develop, his hands and his footwork develop. But we saw a lot of struggles with him as far as his get off and that handwork that I was talking about. Um, that's going to be really a project piece for them moving forward, just as any one tech in the entire NFL is going to be. I mean, you can't expect this guy to come in and immediately be a Vita Vea for you, or whoever you want to call him. This is a guy that they wanted for one reason, and that's because they've allowed seemingly 150 rush yards per game over the last 3 years, give or take. So when you have that issue in the middle of the field, especially interior defensive line, you don't shy away from it. You pick the guy that has insane strength, has the ability to take on two blockers and space eat and allow your linebackers or other defensive linemen to plug those gaps and stop the run. It's going to come for him. It's just going to need time, just as any rookie is going to be. So any of the discourse there needs to be completely eliminated, as more of it can be talked about maybe halfway through the season or towards the end of the season. But right now, let the kid play. Let the kid go in there and get some volume, get some reps in. I do think he's going to feed so well off of guys like Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence, opening up the edges a little bit so that way he can be more comfortable just in his own zone and his own gap. So really exciting player. Obviously, we're going to move week to week with him, but there's nothing really more to be said there other than let him develop, let him have his chance. Moving to the next guy I want to talk about, staying on the defensive line, someone I'm really excited about being Junior Fehoko. It's really his flexibility that excites me more than anything, given that he can play a three-tech position, and with as quick as his hands are and his knowledge of rushing off of the edge, is going to open up some space from the inside of the defensive line moving outward and allow your one-techs to kind of like Mozzie Smith to space eat again. So being able to have that flexibility across the entire defensive line is huge for Dan Quinn. As everybody knows, flexibility is pretty much a priority for him, as well as size and strength. You see it with the safety room over the last 2 years that he'll take anybody that can be utilized somewhere else and immediately use them. So Junior Fehoko, like I said, his ability to be very quick off the line and quick with his hands provides the perfect depth piece for rotational value. So really excited for him. Let's key in on him and pay attention to him as he continues to develop, especially with other guys like Golston on the fence, with Gallimore on the fence. It's going to be very interesting to see what this team looks like later on in the season as well as past this season. Going back in the defense a little bit, going into the safety room, I'm going to touch on Marquise Bell. Now, I say safety room pretty lightly because as this week it was talked about, as well as him being listed on the official 53-man roster as a linebacker, knowing that DeMarvion Overshown's hit really takes a toll for this defense and what he was looking like and the role he was going to have come week one. Marquise Bell, I do think, is going to thrive a little bit in this new position. He's not going to be an immediate impact, but his ability to play linebacker and then shift back to safety or in a nickel linebacker role if he needs to be, kind of in a J-Ron Curse type of role in the linebacker position. I'm really excited to see what he can do there. It's going to be a whole new look, so it may take some time if he is getting a high volume of reps. But to be able to have that type of security when guys are getting injured or you're cutting guys like Jabril Cox, that kind of weakens your depth a little bit. We'll see how it goes. I do believe in Dan Quinn and what he does with his safety rooms most of the time. So seeing Marquise Bell go out there and bring a lot of his vision and explosiveness as a heat-seeking missile towards the ball, I think is actually going to help out and run fits a little bit more than trying to go outside and find either a vet role or somebody that that can just kind of be a body there for other guys to feed off of. So, like I said, really excited to see Marquise Bell take that position into hands and see what he can do with it. Now I'm going to move a little bit further back in that defense, looking at the cornerback room. Not really much to say with this, or as how deep this room is. We know what we're going to have in probably the best cornerback duo in the NFL between Diggs and Gilly, then providing Deron Bland there and his sophomore season, how he can build on that. You have one of the best secondary rooms, if not the best secondary in the NFL. The key player I want to touch on, though, is Eric Scott Jr., who unexpectedly kind of made this roster. I think a lot of people were keying more in on Kelvin Joseph and Nashawn Wright taking in the last two spots of the cornerback room, but they did go with an extra cornerback, bringing in Eric Scott Jr., who primarily in college was kind of a zone thriver. He really fed off of being able to watch the quarterback's eyes and see where the ball was coming to him. But this preseason, he actually shocked me in his ability to stay in the hip pocket of his receivers and actually just track the football itself rather than sitting and waiting on the quarterback to make a decision. So his ability to translate into the NFL and progress on that, I think, is what created a role for him on this 53-man roster. So just as a depth piece really right now, obviously we're probably not going to see a lot of high usage, probably a lot of special teams reps from Eric Scott, but it provides incredible security when you have some elite players on the line right now. You get an injury, or something happens to a couple of your starting pieces, I think this is the best security blanket that this defense and even offense has had with depth that we have seen pretty much in the Dak Prescott era. His ability to make this roster out of what he was selected as just goes to show you how this front office has really taken strides from last season to this season in dedicating themselves to trying to win a championship. Because last season, when we were around this time talking about depth pieces and seeing where some guys could go out of the draft, it was almost disencouraging to look at as far as going into the future and their commitment to a lot of the vets on here, like Dak Prescott or DeMarcus Lawrence on the defensive side of the ball. So for them to look at this roster initially at the end of last season, coming into this off season, saying these are the specific roles that we need to get better at and we need to deepen so that way our future can be building and not just go for it right now and then we're done. So really excited about these keynote players that I mentioned. There's not a whole lot more to go off of until we see actual game reps from some of these guys. Obviously, we've seen preseason reps and what they can do against some secondary defenses and offenses, but moving into week one of the season, we know what we're going to have on the field. We know the starting 11 for each side of the ball is one of the more elite groups in the entire NFL. I do believe, other than squads like Philadelphia or Kansas City, that this is one of the more complete rosters in the entire league. So to be able to say that and then provide all of this depth that I just mentioned, I think really gives you the best chance possible at a championship. With all of that being said, touching on some key players coming into the squad, I want to give an outlook on what this season can behold for us as fans in the totality of this 53-man roster. Going to the offensive side of the ball, including a lot of the guys we're talking about that have been brought in and groomed a little bit so far this preseason as depth. We're going to see a whole lot of development from a lot of these guys on the offensive side of the ball, a lot of new relationships being created, as well as expanding upon the scheme that they're going to be using this year. You have a brand new offensive coordinator who has a voice directly into the ear of the man calling the plays, as well as handing those reins off to your franchise quarterback in the middle of a game to make game management decisions, playmaking decisions, and to have full control of his offense for pretty much the first time in his career. You have so much more speed and route running ability in the wide receiver room that the expansion of what Dak Prescott is going to be looking at on the field makes it a very quarterback-friendly offense. I think we're going to see roles all the way down to Jalen Tolbert in the wide receiver 4 role have immediate impact come week one. As far as the offensive line goes, having a fully healthy starting offensive line is such a key for a team at the beginning of a season. You always hope for no injuries, especially with a couple of guys that are either coming off injury or have the past of it. But for them to be able to have a complete offseason together, even with Zach Martin sitting out some time as a Hall of Famer. They're going to be able to come right in and pick up right where they left off as that specific group, adding those three new pieces that, or those two new pieces that I touched on earlier. It just makes this such a well-rounded offense to develop on. It's going to be very exciting to see what they look like about halfway through the season. Going to the defensive side of the ball, we're going to get exactly what we've seen the past couple of seasons. Tons of turnovers and a whole lot of pressure. Dan Quinn has such an act for coming in and taking guys kind of out of their comfort zone and putting them in a role that is specifically unique to their talents. That not only with some of these depth pieces and rookies coming in, but seeing the progression of Micah Parsons, Leighton Vander Esch finally settling into his comfortable role after taking that contract last offseason, being able to build that continuity between these guys and have so much trust in each other. I do believe this has the potential to be the best defense in the NFL, not just this season, but moving forward for a very long time. With that being said, I'm just really excited for the season outlook. I'm really excited to go ahead and get to week 1 against the Giants. It's going to be a fantastic test for this team to go ahead and see what they can do within the division, as well as what they can do against a building team that has a high chance at the playoffs. So just really excited about this roster overall. With all of that being put together, and to conclude this video, I just want to say thank you to anybody who's going to tune in. Thank you to anybody who has followed me and encouraged me into doing this. The Dallas Cowboys community is the greatest on earth, and I couldn't be any more thankful for the guys that have pushed me, informed me, and helped me in my knowledge with the Dallas Cowboys and just football overall. That is going to be actually it for today. Hopefully more coming later this week. We're going to be able to see week 1. So I'm going to have a couple pieces of content coming out for you guys, evaluating what that game is going to look like, and then post game to see where the Cowboys look from there. So if you liked what you heard today, whether you agreed or disagreed, leave me some feedback. Let me know. Drop a like on this video, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.